I'm grateful to my therapist for listening to me and supporting me. But ultimately, I needed to be told, shut up and feel, change the channel. It's all good, because it is all good.
Before we get into the show, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, First Human, of which I am a co-founder. First Human is dedicated to extraordinary impact in the world through exceptional leadership. So if you're looking to elevate the leadership of your team or your organization, then do check us out. We also offer one-to-one coaching. So if you'd like to get coached by me or one of my extraordinarily talented fellow coaches, then head over to firsthuman.com. And with that, back to the show. And we are live for another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Greg Wrenn. He is an associate English professor at James Madison University, where he weaves climate science and literary studies together. He is the author of this, Mothership, a memoir of wonder and crisis, which is about your experience, Greg, of turning to psychedelic plants and endangered coral reefs as a means to heal from PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I am hugely honored to have you on the show. I'm really excited to get into this. As I was saying to you before we came on, I've read the start of the book, which is the experiences in your childhood, which sort of sets you up for this journey of recovery. I can't wait to hear about your adventures in healing. So very warm welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. And where are you joining us from?
I am in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. So I think John Denver sings about this area in one of his songs. But it's we're quite close to West Virginia, kind of in the mountains of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So it's quite beautiful. Unlike Britain, it seems we have a sunny day here today in Virginia. So that's something to be grateful for.
Brilliant.
But I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, and something I know from the book, you've obviously got this absolute love of nature and the natural world, and it comes through in all these elaborate and beautiful descriptions of your experience of nature in the book. So are you out in the sticks where you are? Are you living pretty close to nature, or?
Well, we live quite close to the university that's here where I teach,
Right.
James Madison University. But you can get in your car and you can go 15, 20 minutes and be in the middle of nowhere, essentially, and you can scream at the top of your lungs, and no one will know.
Yeah.
So sometimes that comes in handy these days.
Yeah, I was going to say I could relate. Have done. I've definitely screamed at the moon. Yeah, many a times. Yeah.
Find
Great.
a moor somewhere in North England, right? To just go out and let out a good yelp. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or just a busy street in London, right?
Oh boy.
Cool. Okay, so and I know that you also you don't necessarily get into the weeds of some of your childhood experiences, as I alluded to.
Sure, I can talk
but
a little
it'd
bit
be
about
useful
those.
to
Yeah.
just perhaps start there, talk a bit about your
Absolutely.
childhood and some of the
Absolutely.
underpinnings of the PTSD.
Sure. So, and I don't think this is gratuitous information because it's so central to my story, Mothership. My mom was my abuser until I was almost an adult, and it was very difficult in many ways. And CPTSD, complex PTSD. I know in Britain, folks are starting to talk about it more. People in the United States are starting to talk about it more as well. And basically, it's with classic PTSD, the veteran comes home to from the battlefield, and they hear a gunshot in the forest. It's just a deer hunter, but that innocuous gunshot here brings them back to the battlefields of Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, for me, just bonding with another person, dropping my defenses and really bonding with someone, that was my trigger. That's what brought me back to the battlefield of my family. And so people should know that, CPTSD is the result of prolonged, repeated interpersonal abuse from which the victim cannot escape. And so you learn that other people are a threat because you have that um, kind of model for a human for a relationship, that foundational model in a relationship that with your parents. And if they're hurting you, then and you can't leave, then that sets you up for complex PTSD. So that is part of that's a big part of my story, is 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 the intense need to be remothered, um, and the intense need to feel safe in my body and in the world. Because when you've had your boundaries violated so many times, um, it's really hard to know who to trust, even yourself.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And when did you first start to realize that you'd had an abusive childhood?
Yeah,
When did you awaken to that?
I think I think probably when I left for university. That's when I sort of began to really truly understand it. And and it's but I had addictive, compulsive behaviors that really kind of kept everything squashed down,
Mm,
to some extent. And so I never really, um it took some time for me to really see the entirety of it all. And then, of course, working with ayahuasca, right? This psychedelic rainforest tea, which is an anti-amnesic. It helps you remember the past. It helps
mm,
repressed traumatic memories surface. Um, then I really, could see the the abusive childhood in its complexity, right?
mm,
Because it wasn't just, there was also love in my family in a weird way. There was love, there was support, which actually made it even harder. But at the end of the day, it was not a place that I really should have been. So I'm 44 now, and so thank goodness I've gotten older. Thank goodness I've worked as hard as I have, to not only kind of survive, but um, I guess you could say prevail. Like really, to not take my life. I was walking a suicidal path for sure, and but I don't have to do that. My species might be on a suicide mission of sorts, it seems, but we don't have to be on personal suicide missions. And so that's been enormously freeing for me to um, to really value my life and value my body, um, and learn to give back, because that's the other part. It's like, yes, I've gone to these reefs in Indonesia, and I've spent a lot of time underwater with these incredible creatures. I went to the Amazon, and I've worked with ayahuasca. But at the end of the day, I'm just a person. I'm just a person who wanted to feel better and to give back. I went to these sort of exotic places, but what's not exotic at all is the desire to give back, the desire to be of help. And in terms of the environment, in terms of the climate crisis, um, Mother Earth needs as much help as she can get.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
I'm no longer kind of involved in those, addictive compulsive behaviors like I was, and I'm able to. I have time now. I have time to try and give back. I had time to write a book. I have time to be on a podcast. I've got mental clarity, the mental clarity to write a book and to be on a podcast and talk about these things and be on a book tour, talking about these things. So um, it feels good to be where I am now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd love to plot some of the waypoints for you to
Sure.
ultimately to finding the ayahuasca. So you said you
Hmm.
started to get this consciousness when you went to university. Was that somebody you met? Was it just through your own self
Hmm.
reflection? Yeah. How did you first start to become aware of
Hmm.
this trauma in your childhood and
Sure.
how it might be driving your compulsions? Indeed, if you did come to that realization, but yeah, that's interested in that first awakening there.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, I went to college and suddenly, uh, I should say, I had worked for probably 6 or 7 years to get into Harvard in the
Okay.
United States, right? And so and that was also a way to kind of keep things squashed down, to be a workaholic and to be that single minded about it. And so, without any family connections or anything, I got into Harvard. This kid from the deep South. I grew up in North Florida, and maybe some of your listeners know North Florida is essentially South Georgia, and so very quite conservative in many ways. And so, when I left that place, I and went to Harvard. Then it's like, well, I'm here, and so a lot of that workaholism fell away because I had a quote unquote arrived, but I got really depressed. I got really depressed, and I began to ask myself, well, what's next? And I think I didn't really necessarily know the answer to that question. I just knew that I felt terrible. I knew that I felt really alone and really scared. And so I went to therapy. The university, had some free therapy, and so I went for that, and then it slowly started to maybe tell my story about what had happened to me as a kid. And then, therapists were like, well, essentially, that's really messed up.
Mm.
And so I think, they helped me see that, um that this was, that this was something that was, what had happened to me was really, really wrong. Um and of course, then they put me on Zoloft, right? They put me on an SSRI, and that didn't, other than, do you all call it a wanker in the UK? I think it affected my wanker. But I couldn't have sex, really, with
Oh,
Zoloft.
right. Wank. Yeah. No, for us, wanker it's a pejorative. It means like somebody isn't like an arsehole. It's the equivalent of arsehole or something.
Oh, pardon me. Well, yeah, it affected my man parts, and I was not really able to. I was depressed. It, in a weird way, it just made me more heavy and sort of numb, and it make me want to. It didn't make me want to love my life or anything, and it just didn't quite, it wasn't quite an antidepressant, even though that's what they had said it was.
Mm.
um Pardon my ignorance of
It was an anti something else.
Britishisms.
Yeah.
Yeah, anti, yes, it is something else. So yeah, so I think that's that's how it happened, because it is difficult for everyone usually to leave home and to go to
Mm,
college, and I think it was particularly hard for me, and I wasn't special anymore. I was a very small fish in a very large ocean at Harvard, um, and so I had to confront some hard truths there.
right. Yeah,
Hmm.
and as you talk, it's particularly I relate to that as you described it, a therapist saying, "Well, that's messed up," right? That was a lot. That was for
Hmm.
me the early gift of therapy was people saying, "No, no, that's right. That should have been painful," and actually having me slow down and say, "Well, hang on, Richard, you've skipped over that. That you realize that was abusive, or you realize that was
Hmm.
that was awful, right?" That was
Hmm.
one of the gifts of therapy I found was that it helped me see the reality of my early experiences versus
Hmm.
my tendency to diminish, dismiss.
Definitely. Yeah, and so I was in therapy for 20 years.
Right.
And so, it was really helpful to have that sounding board and to sort of check out, okay, like this happened in my family of origin, like is this happening in every family?
Right.
There was constantly that checking, and then realizing, oh no, no, that's really messed up. You could have been taken from your family and put in foster care. Like, no, that's not okay. That wasn't okay. But I should say, I don't think I would be doing my due diligence if I didn't say that, after a while, even talk therapy didn't, it sort of, I mean, it kept me afloat, but it never quite got to the core wound.
Mm,
Because as someone with CPTSD, right, the act of bonding with another person can bring up panic, right, can bring up, is a kind of trigger in a kind of PTSD way. So you might understand that the kind of corrective experience that therapists were trying to give me oftentimes felt very invasive and felt scary.
right.
And so um, and there was so much in therapy that was about um, prosecuting my parents for the billionth, millionth, gazillionth time, right? And that's also part of the business model of therapy is like, well, we'll talk about that next time, again, for the thousandth time. And so, at a certain point, therapy really stopped being effective for me, but I still kept going
Okay.
because I didn't have anyone else to really talk to. But I think that one of the things that some of the like after I started to work with ayahuasca 5 years ago, some of the I guess you could say coaches, some of the coaches that I started to work with in those settings, the kind of the facilitators in those settings, would say, no, stop talking about it. I don't want to hear any more about that. I don't care. In fact, one man, this was, and I talk about this in the book. One wonderful facilitator, really, he was wonderful. I was, this was after a ceremony. I was still on the medicine. It was sort of fading, but I was still very much on the medicine. And I started to tell him about my childhood. And do you know, he started yawning and he pretty much fell asleep. Yes, it was 3 a.m., but it was very instructive to have him yawn and fall asleep,
Right.
because there was part of me that was like, what? You're supposed to be there for me. You're supposed to listen and be present. And I was like, but wait a second. Like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life talking about this. And so I think that the book is also, it's the path, it's learning to let go. It's learning to take, this is a visualization that might be useful for people. I've come to see that there's this clenched fist in the center of my brain, maybe around the pineal gland or so, in that region, tickle, tickle. And so, and so there's like this clenched fist right in the center. And it's like, but can you consciously consciously unclench it when the story starts going, right? Can you be the witness, the unclenching witness, you could say, as the story starts going again? And can you just drop the storyline, feel the sensations for 15 seconds? 15 seconds is good. And then can you change the channel? Because I think that's something that talk therapists don't often uh, they don't often coach their clients enough in, which is it's time to change the channel. It's time to pay attention to something else. Um, if the shitty committee of the mind is really, really going and you're starting to blame another person in your mind again, and it's just a thought groove that's really, really deep in your mind, it's only going to get deeper if you keep doing that because you're just practicing that mental training, really. And so why not look out the window? Why not look at your hands? Why not splash some cold water on your face? Anything but continuing that repetitive thought loop, right? And so, and psychedelics really, and we will go more into the science of this, I'm sure, but as a kind of control alt delete for the brain in making the brain more malleable and coachable, you're actually able to practice choosing your thoughts.
Mm.
You're actually able to practice letting go, like practicing that in any moment. And that has been, I'm grateful to my therapists. I'm grateful to my therapist for listening to me and supporting me. But ultimately, I needed to be told, shut up and feel, change the channel. It's all good because it is all good.
Yeah.
It in a lot from one perspective, it is all good. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is. Yeah. And so I'm interested. So 5 years ago, you tried ayahuasca. So I'm interested in that pivot. So you're doing therapy,
Sure.
and what was the trigger for you to start exploring, outside of outside of talk therapy?
Well, without getting into too much detail on air here, I was very much walking a suicidal path. I was engaging in really just self-destructive, stupid behavior, and I was putting myself daily in harm's way.
Oh wow.
Um, and yes, and so and went to a psychiatrist, and he didn't know what to do, and he gave me Ritalin. I guess he thought I was about to kill myself, so I guess Ritalin will presumably, if you're on Ritalin, you're not going to kill yourself because you're just so hopped up and jumpy. But that actually only made my compulsions and addictions worse. So I got really scared, and I'd had a psychedelic experience very randomly, and it was probably around age 37, 38 that I had this experience, and uh, and and people can read about it. I smoked DMT and had a really incredible experience, where I met um, a goddess,
Wow.
kind of the mother that I had been always been looking for. And so that was that was a really beautiful experience that I held on to. But yeah, this suicidal behavior kind of intensified. Michael Pollan's book, man, some of your readers may know about this book, How to Change Your Mind, which is about kind of how psychedelics can be used therapeutically and kind of the science behind it. And so I read this book, and I realized that this was kind of something I probably needed to do. And
Right.
then I did some Googling, as we do, and I, started to feel, but I, did more research a little bit, and I felt very suicidal, and I was not in a good place at all. And so, what do you do when you feel suicidal? You go, you go on Reddit, and
I've
you, you go on Reddit,
great line.
and you look for the ayahuasca ceremony with the most upvotes. And so, um, I went to this shamanic healing center, as it's called Dream Glade in the Amazon, and I had a really incredible experience. I was lucky. Don't I wouldn't recommend anyone do that. You need to do more research than what I did. But
You
yeah,
mean
I just
more
I
than
just
Reddit?
read. Uh,
I said, what do you mean more than Reddit? Reddit knows everything.
yeah,
We're
it
joking.
was. No, I know we're joking, but that is how a lot of people get a lot of their information,
Yeah.
but I should say that it really was the science. It was the science behind what psychedelics do to help heal the traumatized brain, the addicted brain, the depressed brain. Like the science behind that was so inspiring. And there wasn't just one study or two studies. There were
Mm.
many studies. And and so um so so because I believe so much in science, and also knowing that science is never final, it's constantly evolving, I took this chance, and I went, and I kind of was the guinea pig for some of these scientists who had published these papers. And I had an incredible experience. And I began to be remothered. I began to be reparented by this medicine of ayahuasca, which has been known for thousands of years as a teacher, as a mother. And so it's certainly nothing that any of us discovered. This knowledge has been around for many, many, many years, many millennia. Um, and some of it may be hard to believe, you know, but I go into painstaking detail about it in my book, and I go into painstaking detail about the science behind ayahuasca's, effectiveness, to treat trauma, particularly CPTSD. And ultimately you could say that, ayahuasca kind of gave me that corrective experience. And yes, it was invasive. And yes, it was scary, folks. It was definitely, but uh, it occurred, and
Well,
I'm here today.
can you talk me through the story? I mean,
Sure.
you turn up in the Amazon, and some guy in a in a funny hat meets you at the airport. How did just tell me
Oh,
how
sure.
the whole
No, no,
process.
yeah, absolutely. So there was, yeah, so there was, the owner picked us up in a 4x4, because we had to go into the jungle, because his center was in the jungle. And he had been there for probably 5 or 6 years. I think maybe even 10 years. I'm not sure. He'd been there for a long time. And so he was from Britain, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And he's no longer the owner of Dream Glade, but he was the owner then. And so he took us there, and a bunch of us, and probably 9 of us, 9 or 10 of us. And uh, there were two indigenous Shipibo curanderos, healers, who were there. And they have worked, they spend months at a time in the rainforest in silence, eating probably river fish and plantains, and that's it, for months at a time. And then they
Mm.
also diet on the various plants, including ayahuasca. And they're like monks of, almost like Tibetan monks that are, going into the mountains to meditate in a cave intensively for months at a time. That's what they do, essentially, in the rainforest, in their way, living in a hut instead of a cave. But and so these were very, very trained, experienced curanderos, healers, and they're actually first cousins, Raul and Lydia, um, and they have a great working relationship. And they one of the things that they do during the ceremonies, which is central to ayahuasca's healing power, is that they channel songs on the spot. They don't memorize them. They channel these songs on the spot. Uh, the entity in the ayahuasca tea is sort of singing through them. You could say that's how they understand it. And they're singing what are called icaros, Icaro, icaros. They're singing these songs on the spot. They're channeling them, and they are healing songs. And these songs are meant to heal the group. They can also, with powers that I don't begin to understand and frankly hope to never acquire, they're able to see people's ailments and energy and so forth. And so they sing on the spot for just you and what's ailing you. And you don't understand what they're saying. They're speaking, I believe they're speaking Shipibo, but when you're on the medicine in a pitch black hut in the middle of the rainforest, um, it for me it sounded like extraterrestrial, like an extraterrestrial transmission or something. It was very powerful, very very. It's like the equivalent, like the sonic shamanic equivalent of a scalpel in surgery. Like these songs really get through, and you're it's like they're singing to every cell in your body. And And so this is a big part of the ceremonies. And then as folks know, they're probably, drinking ayahuasca involves oftentimes purging. And so vomiting, sometimes it comes out the other end. So there are bathrooms that are close by.
And did that happen to
And
you? Sorry, forgive the question, but I'm intrigued. Did that
no,
happen to you?
actually, it definitely did. It definitely did. In fact, I got a little brown spot on the foam mattress that I was on in the hut. So absolutely, because also part of it is the experience of, as I say in the book, sometimes you have to regress to progress.
Yeah.
And if you've had developmental trauma, which might actually go back to when you were an infant or a toddler, you might have to kind of, and also we know that, psychedelics give you the brain of a child. Like children don't have compartmentalized, siloed off, walled off parts of their brain. They're using all regions of their brain to solve problems and to be in the world. And so young children, are essentially tripping all the time. This is from Alison Gopnik out of UC Berkeley and some of her work. So you can see this on brain scans. And so, I needed to have a do-over, right? I needed to become a child again. I needed to have the imprinting that I received as a child from my parents. I needed to have that replaced to some extent by the imprinting of this medicine. Now, it wasn't going to be a therapist, right? Because that wasn't going to work for me. But in terms of the entity of Madre Ayahuasca, like she does this. She can reparent you. She can remother you, and that's not always cupcakes and cartwheels. It's difficult. It can be a difficult process, but a beautiful process too.
Mm.
But you might shit the bed. You might you might vomit, and with abandon, right? Because none of us really wants, few of us really want to vomit, right? It's something that's not civilized.
Yeah.
But like, it's also something the body just does. You don't think about it. It just happens. And so there's something so freeing about just letting go of control, and then you're puking into the bucket, but you're also puking out the past.
Oh, yeah,
You're
right.
puking out all the things that you're holding on to. And so as you vomit, you connect, hopefully you're connecting with what you really want to let go of. And then you look at it barely because it's so dark, or maybe you look at it the next morning and you just think, wow, that was what she did to me.
Mm.
That was what he did to me. It's right there floating in that bucket. And so
Mm.
there's something extremely satisfying about that. But also so healing, it's so healing because we have to change our story. The story is, I'm fucked. There's nothing I can do. I'm going to be a victim forever. Right. And if you've got that story and you're holding on to that story so tightly, then you are going to be treading water the rest of your life. At
Mm.
best, you'll be treading water the rest of your life. But if you can actually begin to interrogate that belief and let go of that belief and believe, actually, I can let go of the past and it's happening right now. Well, that is an absolute game changer for your brain. And um and your destiny's been changed
Wow.
if you can get
Yeah.
rid of that belief that you'll always be a victim.
Yeah.
I don't like to say the word victim. I think the word victim is it's so self-limiting. I'm not going to let what someone did to me in the past cage me in some identity as a victim or even survivor. I don't, survivor is someone who's like on an island, after a plane crashes and they're
Right.
like, eating crabs and gross coconuts, like that's what a survivor is. I'm not a survivor. I'm much more than that.
Yeah.
Maybe some of your listeners can relate to that.
Yeah. No, no. I think that makes sense. And well, I think with my own experience, I first had to claim my victimhood. And that was like, I had to, like we were talking about earlier, I first had to accept that all this stuff had happened and I was a victim of it. But yeah,
Definitely.
you see a lot of people, and especially, and sometimes therapy can enable this, I agree, will stay there, right? And they'll develop a great deal of self-empathy, but they'll ultimately not do the regression work to get to the to the curative act, which is, as you say, letting go of all of that pain or trauma, whatever's there for you. Um, I did it without plant medicine, but I totally relate to your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I should say, not everyone, not everyone needs plant medicine. Ayahuasca has been described to me as a last resort medicine, and I think as your listeners read my book and they see me trying so many different things to to feel better. Going to Indonesia, going to these reefs that are still gorgeous. In a world where reefs are going extinct. You know, like these reefs are still gorgeous, and to go there and really learn what's to get a taste of what safety is like in relationship with another being, and of course coral is another being.
Mm.
And it doesn't have hands, right? It doesn't have hands that can touch you or violate you, right? It can't make fun of you. And so there's something. I tried a lot of different things and had a lot of people really try and support me. And then it just didn't quite. It didn't do what it needed to do. Um, and then I found myself on Reddit. So yeah, it's a medicine of it's
And
a
the rest
medicine
is
of
history.
last resort.
Yeah,
Yeah, the rest is history. But it continues on, all of this.
yeah. So
The
so you
medicine of
do the
life.
yeah, and so I'm intrigued. So you puke in the bucket. You've shit the bed. You've had this incredible experience with these other in this group. Then
Mhm.
yeah, what's it like? What emerging from that? Yeah, how is it?
Don't go home right away, and I didn't go home right away. I teach college, so I was able to I have summers where I'm not in the classroom. So after these ceremonies, I went to the most biodiverse part of the Amazon, one of the most biodiverse parts of the Amazon, which is in Peru. At a place called Tohuayo, and I talk about this in the book. And then and so I went to this place, this biosphere reserve, and I had a guide, and it was the rainy season, and all the trees were in about 6 feet of water or more, and so the forests were pretty much, they were all flooded. And so I brought my snorkel and my fins and a lot of foolhardiness, and and I would snorkel. So I spent my so after my ceremonies, I snorkeled in a tributary of the Amazon. With I swam in the vicinity of. I don't want people to think I was riding them. These were pink dolphins.
Oh,
I
wow.
was. Yeah. So pink dolphins were near me. They're a freshwater dolphin that live in the Amazon, and so I spent time with them. And but the main thing I did was not snorkeling. It was just being in the canoe with my guide. And we went to the oldest trees that he knew of. And I would lay back. He would take a nap, which is fine. I don't care. I would lay back. I'd set a timer for an hour, and I would just meditate under this centuries old tree, which was in water. So we were tied up right next to it.
Right.
And so I had a good 10 days in this biosphere reserve, just communing with nature and being with nature and being with the rainforest the rainforest that had saved my life, right? The rainforest that had, from which the ayahuasca vine and the chacruna leaf, those are the two ingredients in the ayahuasca brew, that those ingredients came from the rainforest. And so I was really there to, looking back, I was there to say thank you. I was there to bask in the glory. I was not there to think about the past. I was not there to plan the future. I was just there to be. And of course, because it was such a deep process that I had gone through at Dream Glade, at this ayahuasca center, for my first three ceremonies, there were traumatic flashbacks that continued to happen. Just like in ceremony, traumatic flashbacks came up for me. Traumatic flashbacks came up for me in the Amazon while I was with these trees. But I felt safe. I felt safe because I had a guide. I felt safe because this tree felt like my protector, and they are our protector. They're
Mm.
sucking a whole lot of carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it for us. So I really began to care about nature, and this is where I talk about ayahuasca not only as trauma medicine, but as um, kind of an eco sacrament, an activator, you could say, of ecological conscience.
Yeah. Wow. That's so fascinating that although I haven't, I completely relate to this because as I did my own regression therapy, not plant assisted, but just,
Yes.
but very similar process. I also find myself getting more increasingly connected to nature. I think as I get increasingly connected to my own nature,
Mm-hmm.
and I can be vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
with myself and feel, my own body as nature. I feel like I relate more to the trees and the animals and the water. Yeah, it's fascinating that that's been true for you as well.
Absolutely. It's like you're learning. We're learning how to have compassion for ourselves, and as we have compassion for ourselves, we learn to have compassion for our mother, the
Mm,
mother of all, Mother Earth. It can be no
mm,
other way. That's our natural state. That's
mm.
who we are. We're coming back to who we really are when we just cool the shitty committee, cool the fires of the mind a little bit, and start to feel some self-compassion. And then you look, I'm looking out my window, looking at the mountains, looking out the window, and you see mountains, you see a tree. And how can you not? We're just pre-programmed to feel an affinity with that, to know that that's where we're from and we're part of that. And so it's not anything you force. It's like barfing. You
Mm.
just, when it's time to barf, you barf. When
Yeah.
it's time to feel like a son of Mother Nature, it's time. And it's just a truth you'll always come back to if you're available enough for that.
Yeah. Nice. You put it beautifully, and it reminds me. I had another guest. He's called Uncle, and he's a dream catcher in the
Uncle.
Icelandic tradition, the indigenous of no, not Iceland, of Greenland, and he's an advisor to the UN on climate change and so on. But he got to this point where he realized he needed to worry less about the melting ice caps and more about melting his own heart and people melting their own heart.
Ooh.
And that provides the connection to nature. And that needs to be the foundation. Well, as you describe, economic and ecological consciousness. And that's the starting point.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said ecological, you said economic first, but
Yeah.
really it is economic. And economic, eco coming from that Greek word oikos, which means house or home. And so it's like learning to care about your home. Like, this is our home. Do we want to have an economy in which we're burning massive amounts of fossil fuels, which will lead to the planet overheating and our extinction? Like, you don't want that. Like, if someone were to come to my house, which I'm in right now, and set it on fire, or turn the thermostat up to, some really high temperature, I would be really upset. And so we have to remember, like, this is our home. This is our only home. You can try and live in space. Have at it. Good luck. But this is our home. This is our planet. And to destroy that is to destroy her, is the definition of insanity. Just like if I were to set fire to my own house, that you would say I was insane. Well, that's what we're doing as a species. But it's all in the name of economic progress. But there's also our home to think about.
Right. And connection to home is through our own hearts. I mean, that's I think, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what
It's the heart. I
yeah.
love that. I love that. I love that quote, and I think that's, yeah. It's like we have to have that. It's that personal relationship.
Mm.
It all comes back to our heart, and then connected with once some compassion has awakened, the melting of the heart has melted some, and there's more compassion that's able to flow, then of course you're not gonna do things that are gonna hurt other people. You're gonna really try and work to help other people and to help the planet. So,
Mm. Yeah.
um, but then it's back and forth. But yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And so then, I mean, so you do this first trip, you then spend time in Peru, and you're spending time meditating with these old trees and so on. And how does your
Hmm.
life change, after that? Because this is over 5 years now. So I'm interested in how your life continues to
Hmm.
play out after that first experience.
Sure. Well, so those were three ceremonies, and then I continued to work with the medicine.
Okay.
So it was not, for me, it was not three ceremonies and I'm healed, hallelujah. It was not like that at all. It was because you know ayahuasca psychedelics, they prime you for new learning, right? They prime you for new learning. They don't change you bippity boppity boo into this exalted being who can turn, you know, water into wine. That isn't going to happen, and people think that it may happen that way, but it doesn't. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if it primes you for new learning, then you have to be ready to learn. You have to be ready to work. And so, I did have a therapist at that time, and he was enormously helpful because I was integrating from these experiences, and my brain was more malleable, it was more coachable. I wasn't going to my therapist looking for that corrective experience anymore. I really was looking for coaching,
Right.
which is, a slightly different paradigm. And so I needed encouragement, and so I started to work with him more and my therapist, and um, I just continued to work with ayahuasca, and I've probably sat you know probably about 3 dozen or so ceremonies.
Oh, wow.
And yes, and so it's something it's been really, really important for my growth. And um and so and then I ended up meeting my husband in 2019, right after I came back. Um and he and and that has also been a big part of my healing, is being in being in a relationship with another human being, living with that person. That is, especially during a pandemic, when you can't really leave the house so much, that is 24/7 DIY exposure therapy for someone with CPTSD. So yes, buttons were pressed, freakouts happened, and we worked through it. And that was a big. I would say that was also, my relationship with Tony has been enormously helpful for me in recovering from CPTSD, because um, it was kind of a laboratory for both of us to try out, truly being in a more vulnerable kind of relationship for both of us.
Mm.
And we learned a lot. So yes, I was primed for new learning, and new learning is not always fun. It
Right.
can be painful, right? You
Yeah.
realize, oh, you can't do that. If you're going to be with someone, you gotta find another way to say that, or you have to learn to
Yeah.
compromise, and all these things which are so central to being to getting to living a happy life. So
Mm.
uh, so those are some broad brushstrokes there.
And the suicidality, did that shift, immediately, or did that reduce over time?
That was pretty quick for me. So something I should say to folks is that antidepressants take 6 to 8 weeks to kick in fully for most people, if they kick in at all. And ayahuasca um, is a rapid antidepressant. It can treat treatment-resistant depression, and it kicks in within 24 hours. Again, this isn't something you just sort of you cook in your garage and bottoms up. No, like, it's got to be in a safe. You have to be in a safe environment. You have to have trained facilitators, and and you can get benefits. You can get benefits like that. But I would say, yeah, the suicide out. I had hope,
Right.
Richard. Right? Like, I had hope, like to drink this medicine, to experience these experiences that I really. I mean, my brain had never gone to these places. Maybe when I was dreaming, I don't know. I can't remember. But it was so powerful and so fucking cool. It was just cool too. Like, it was hard, but it was cool. And I was just like, wow, like, this is a spaceship I want to get back on. And it's not ayahuasca is not addictive. We know that from research, but I just knew that this was something that I could choose to go back to, and it would be difficult, but it would also. I knew that this was my path. I knew that this was a way to let go, to clear the trauma, and there was so much trauma,
Mm.
and um, so that's kind of how that worked out there.
Right. So after the very first session, you saw a
Hmm.
reduction in the suicidality and the depression
Hmm.
dramatically.
I wasn't do I would yes, and I wasn't engaging in these addictive compulsive behaviors
Right.
that were so self-destructive anymore. I mean, like, I'd put my toe in, and then it'd be like, nah, and then I put my
Mm.
toe in, or three toes in, and then I'd be like, nah, and then I would be like, and then I would do it and then feel terrible and then go to another ceremony. And it was like all fine. It was like fine tuning
Mm,
it and realizing you don't have to keep doing these things. You don't have to keep hurting yourself. And so it was a process. Yeah, it was a process. But it
right.
was, yeah, the worst of it was lifted very quickly because I had kind of woken up on a different planet with a different brain in some ways, or a drastically changed brain. And
Right.
so I didn't I had yeah, like I said, I had hope.
Yeah. Fantastic. And the compulsive behaviors gradually, waning as you did more and more of the
Yes.
ceremonies. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's something you have to always be vigilant about. Like I
Mm,
have to always be vigilant about that. I can't, I have to be careful. I have to be. That's why I still work with the medicine. This is why I still, uh, still work intensely, I guess you could say, on myself, because I know, like every addict, you can always just, you could go back. You could go back. It could be that drink, that 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 one hit that you take of your drug of choice that takes you back. And I can't do that. There's too much at stake.
oh, that's interesting you said that, but just contrasting to my own experience with this, like, I
Mm,
'cause I feel like the kind of the driving force for my previous addictions is now greatly
mm,
reduced. So I think that whilst there would be always a risk for me to go back and, like, partake and indulge in certain things, I can't ever imagine myself being like a full-on addict again. There just isn't enough
no,
pain in my system to drive it. So, but do you
right.
relate to that, or do you see
Yeah,
the
I do.
possibility of you going back to full-on addiction?
Well, I think the medicine has shown me that. The medicine shows me like what it would have been like if I had just kept going.
Okay.
And and then to even just go, even to try it once or whatever, to go back
Right.
to the way, or to have to binge for a weekend or something on this, like, you sure, I wouldn't probably keep going, but it
Mm,
would, like, the karma that binging would generate. I don't have time for in my life. I
right.
don't, and
I get it.
it puts, it's just not so good for my life. So
Yeah.
I think that's, I've touched the hot stove so many times that I'm really not wanting to keep burning my hand
Mm,
on it any longer.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
that
So it's a very powerful medicine that keeps me accountable.
yeah, yeah.
Keeps me accountable.
And I would understand if you don't want to answer this question, but when you say you keep going back to the medicine, is that in ceremonies, or are you finding other ways
Mm-mm.
to
No,
use?
that's in ceremonies. No,
Oh, that
that's
is
in
in ceremonies,
ceremonies.
right? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't, it has to be with trained facilitators in a safe environment. And it has to, there can be no DIY on this. It
Oh,
has to
that's interesting.
be,
So it always
yeah,
requires, you don't get to a point where you're kind of safe enough with it. You could do it by yourself. You don't.
maybe someone, but not me. Maybe someone who's worked extensively with it in the Amazon, who
Yeah.
has the blessing of their teacher to do that. But that's not me.
Mm,
Um, which is unlike, say, mushrooms, where yes, you could take 3 grams in the safety of your home or something, and have at it. Um, it's different. It's different.
right.
Ayahuasca is it really is in a lot of ways a medicine of last resort. But
Mm,
that being said, if someone feels called to work with it and they're not on death's door or something, that's okay too. But it's not something you just dabble in, or you say, "Oh, I'm just gonna check this off on my bucket list,"
right.
because that's not really treating the medicine with respect.
Mm,
It's not
I
a it's
see.
not an amusement park ride. Like, you
Mm.
are developing a relationship. with this, with this medicine and with this kind of entity of sorts. So, um,
Yeah.
that's what I can say about that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of it's a little hard to believe, but I hope folks will check out the book, and then they'll see that there are 70 scientific peer-reviewed articles that are woven into the storytelling. There are almost 30 pages of notes in the back. Like, it's a deeply, deeply researched account of recovering from complex PTSD, from trauma, and kind of awakening to social concern, ecological compassion, social concern.
Yeah. And I know that this will be, and I know we don't have long left, but I'm sure there'll be some people listening to this thinking to themselves, yeah, but what about the stories we hear of people, and it triggers bad outcomes for them. And in fact, personally, I've heard of somebody, friend of a friend of a friend, who did it and then
Sure.
became suicidal. What's your experience of that response to people who have that impression or have heard those stories?
Well, I would say, first off, you've got to do your research. You've got to find a place. You've got to find facilitators and curanderos / shamans who are trained, who know what they're doing. You've got to follow their instructions. So if they say you've got to be celibate, even with yourself, for 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after, you follow their instructions. If they say don't eat salt, for 3 days or a week before the ceremony and after the ceremony, don't eat salt. Like, follow their instructions scrupulously. They know what they're talking about. You don't know better than they do. And so that's a big part of it. And so, yes, set and setting, extremely important. Preparing for this, preparing for this, following instructions, having a therapist, right? I think having a therapist or having a coach who can help you prepare for this experience, and then also help you after the experience, is very important. And knowing that too, sometimes the medicine does take you to a really dark place, and that's not an accident. People maybe need to go to that dark place. Do they need to be suicidal? No, they don't need to be suicidal, right? So there's a fine line there, but you've got to have support.
Right.
You've got to have support before, during, and after this. And I would also say one more thing, which is that this is a last resort medicine. It's a last resort medicine. It's a medicine that's been proven to be effective and safe for almost everybody. Just like acetaminophen. Is that what you call that in?
I've never heard of that, but it's not to say it's not what it's called in the UK.
Paracetamol. You say paracetamol,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Good. Okay. Great. So, like, paracetamol is effective and safe for almost everybody.
Right.
There are people who take paracetamol who can die from it or have a terrible reaction from it.
Okay.
And there is a vanishingly small number of people who also, when they work with any psychedelic, have an adverse outcome.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes that's a spiritual emergency, not a psychiatric doom and gloom kind of situation, right? And so maybe you really are in a dark night of the soul, and you need to treat it as such. You don't need to be straitjacketed. You need to work with that, with people who are trained with that. But absolutely, there are risks to everything. But the risks associated with this medicine are overblown, and oftentimes the adverse reactions are because of either the facilitator not doing their job, or the patient, we'll call them the patient, not doing their job in terms of preparation. And maybe they're not even disclosing, hey, I'm on SSRIs, I'm on Zoloft,
okay,
or I took, I snorted cocaine 3 days before the ceremony, and they don't tell anyone. Well, you're going to have an adverse reaction probably.
Yeah.
So it really demands care. It demands attention. It demands researching who you're going to be sitting with, and um, and that's what I would say about that. I would say about that. But I think it's very easy for stories to get overblown and go viral about bad things that happen in any sort of situation in our digital world. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have benefited from this medicine who have not had a bad experience, or
Yeah.
if they had a bad experience, it was a bad experience that helped them get somewhere
Right.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, as one of my teachers says, you don't, when you're vomiting into the bucket, you don't say I'm getting sick. You say I'm getting well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's also a lot of paradigm shifting that has to happen.
Mm.
But so I hope that's useful to your listeners in kind of orienting them about what the potential blessings and potential risks are of the medicine.
Right. Well, and for me, what you've underlined there is the need for respect, respect for the medicine, for the entity, as you described it.
Very important. Very, very important. Not everyone shows up with respect.
Mm.
They don't show up with respect. They think they're showing up with respect, but they're not showing up with respect.
Mm.
And so that and you will, um, you'll have to, you will be made humble. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will be made humble one way or another. You will be made humble.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
and the center you mentioned,
yeah.
that's one you would recommend for people.
Well, I don't think I can recommend
Okay.
anywhere because I just think that's not a great thing to do. But I will say that I had a really good experience there,
And
and
just the name of it again for people who
it's called Dream Glade.
Dream Glade. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to be careful about not sort of endorsing,
Sure.
sort of officially endorsing a person or a place. But I will say I had an incredible experience there. I have spoken with the new owners. They're lovely, and people should do research and reach out to them if they feel called. And 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 Rael and Lydia are still there. So
Right.
hmm
The
hmm
cousins.
yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for that.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you. Really
Fantastic.
appreciate it.
Thanks again. Thanks again, Greg. This has been awesome. Thank you. Bye
Okay.
bye.
See. Bye bye.